I read an interesting article today in the Washington Post. It was about the most assigned books in American colleges and universities. That is, the books that appear most on syllabi from teachers and classes. And very near the top was Plato's Republic. So that you're doing something, that is very interesting, I think. That is, you're reading a book that many, many, many other college students in America have read. It's an interesting thing, and it gives you, I think that's good. I think it gives us a kind of a common set of references or themes with other people in our country, in the world. It's a good thing. And, I guess one of the things I ask myself is, what is everyone talking about? What aspects of this book, what things in this book actually get discussed? Because some things are disturbing, delicate subjects. One might also even say shameful ones. What I'm referring to, and again, these talks are not supposed to be thorough reviews of what happens in each book, but just things that struck me in each book as being interesting and perhaps important, and things that perhaps lead to understanding the deeper themes of Plato's Republic. But one of the things that really strikes me in Book 3, and yes, Book 3 is about the education of the guardians. Book 3 is about how the guardians should be selected, and Books 2 and 3 and are about that, and how they're to be educated, what sort of education they're supposed to get, and what sort of books they're supposed to read, and what sort of books they're not supposed to read. And it's extremely interesting in many respects. But then something very odd comes up on page 85. Socrates has just described the type of education that the guardians should receive, both physical and musical, and really the type of person that is meant to produce. That is, that sort of education, what is the goal of that education? What is the goal of any education? Is really to produce a certain type of person, to shape and mold a certain type of person. And Socrates is describing the sort of person that his education is supposed to produce. And that would be somebody who is both musically and physically beautiful. This is on page 85. Socrates says, "Then if the fine habits in someone's soul and those in his physical form agree and are in concord with one another, so that both share the same pattern, wouldn't that be the most beautiful sight for anyone capable of seeing it?" And Glaucon says, "By far." What's happening here? Socrates then says, "And surely the most beautiful," and he's talking of the young men or boys that are the product of this education of the guardian class. "And surely the most beautiful is also the most lovable, isn't it?" "Of course," says Glaucon. A really musical person, then, a musical person, a person who is in harmony with himself, would passionately love people who are most like that. But a disharmonious person he would not passionately love. Glaucon says, no, he would not, at least not if the defect were in the soul. If it were only in the body, however, he would put up with it and still be willing to embrace the boy who had it. Now, what's going on here? Embrace the boy who had it? Socrates has remarked about if this education that we set up for the guardians is correct, and it will produce boys who are both beautiful in their soul and beautiful in their outer aspect. And then Glaucon says, well, of course, it's more important to be beautiful in the soul. One could still embrace a boy who had a physical defect if he had a beautiful soul. And then Socrates, and it's important, not important, what's important? It's interesting to remark that Plato wrote this book, not Socrates, and that Plato was Glaucon's, I think, half-brother. Socrates says to Glaucon, I understand that you love or have loved such a boy yourself. That is, a boy who had a beautiful soul but a physical defect of some sort, whatever that means. And I agree with you. Okay, so what is happening here? I remarked that I found it very interesting and actually encouraging that the Republic is widely read in American colleges, and that's good. But I wonder how many teachers or classes, when they sit down to discuss book three, talk about this aspect of it. Certainly, I don't think we did. I think one student in her work quoted this, and I don't think she realized that they're talking about, well, she quoted this part on page 86. Socrates says, it seems then that you will lay it down as a law in the city we are founding that a lover, if he can persuade his boyfriend to let him, may kiss him, be with him, and touch him as a father would a son, for the sake of beautiful things. But in all other respects, his association with the one he cares about must never seem to go any further than this. Otherwise, he will be reproached as untrained in music and as lacking in appreciation for beautiful things. Someone quoted that, I think, in her work, but didn't realize that he was talking about sex. That is, he's talking about sex. And that Socrates is talking about the proper relation between a younger man. And I keep saying that when the translation says boy, because I don't want to talk about, it being straight out pedophilia. But that's really what it is. It's pedophilia. I mean, the love of a child. Now, that, of course, is a crime. Yes, it is a crime. Especially in our society, and well, it should be. Right? But one of the things we're introduced here, and you can see Socrates and Plato, I think, taking a very definite position on it, is a tradition of relationships between older men and younger men, and younger. Read Plato; it's all throughout there. This relationship between the lover, who's usually an older person, and the beloved, who's always a younger person. A person who's usually, I don't think of them as little boys. I mean, straight out like little boy pedophilia. I mean, but still, we're talking about teenagers because that boy is usually an epheb, which is Greek for basically a teenager, and a boy who's just beginning on the cusp of manhood. The Greeks often say that age when the beard first appears on the face. And that boy, that age, was really considered to be the highest instance of physical beauty that existed. That is, if you look at the ancient Greek statues, there's a whole genre of statues called the kouros or kouroi, and they were statues of youths. And they're usually thought of as being the Greeks' notion of the ideal of physical beauty. They were naked young men in statues. And that was usually, we think of the Greeks as that is their instantiation of their notion of the greatest form of physical beauty there is, a young man at that age. And one imagines that that's the kind of beloved that Socrates is talking about. And of course, what Socrates is saying is that it's natural to fall in love with somebody that beautiful, especially if they have a beautiful soul, as the guardians are meant to. But that relationship has to be chaste. That is, that the relationship cannot be sexual. That there can be physical contact between an older man and a younger man in this sort of relationship, but it can't pass over into a situation where the older man is sexually gratifying himself with the younger man. That just simply wouldn't be right. What do I make of this? I don't know, but it's extremely interesting and it's disturbing. Of course, it's disturbing, but I think that the notion of sexual desire, of all sorts of desires and how they're to be dealt with is, of course, the larger thing of what Plato's getting at. So a very interesting part of book 3.